Welcome to Paris Paranormal. This is the place you can ask questions, get answers, and find out what's been going on when you hear those bumps in the night that scare you. She's not scared. Well, anyway, we're glad you're here. I'm Terry Keel.
And I'm April Wilson.
She is. And you know, we have an amazing night planned for you tonight because we have Mr. History in the house. That's right, Rick Revel. And welcome, Rick. His show, the History Channel, is on AME TV. It reaches over 120 million in the USA. That is crazy. All those households getting
it's a lot of
you in there for the History Highway. And there's a lot going on with that, so we got to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. And he's got an interesting story to tell, and we want you to know all about it. So, Rick, you've got a lot going on.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. History Highway keeps me very busy.
I mean, let's just have it. Tell us what all you're doing.
Well, I hear he's been on the Grand Ole Opry, so, you know, tell us about all that first, and then we'll get into the meat of the moment.
Well, back several years ago, I ran across Hank Snow's son, Jimmy Snow, and he took a liking to me, he and his wife, and they liked my music, and I wound up, they invited me to be on the Grand Ole Opry, so you have to have an invitation, so that was my invite, and got to be on the, what I call the new Opry, and then after that, I wound up during Fanfare doing 3 different shows at the Ryman in 3 different years during Fanfare, so that was cool, and I got to stand in the center stage where all the big artists crossed across the stage, and I got to sing there, and I actually did David Crockett there too. So
oh my goodness!
One of my historical characters.
How cool is that?
I met Michael Martin Murphey and a lot of cool people like that.
Yeah,
so.
I've been there several times. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
I've not been there, but I like hearing about it.
Oh, it's beautiful.
You'd love the Grand Ole Opry. It's the mother of country music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
as they call
sure
it.
is, isn't it?
I love it.
It's a gateway.
Yep.
So, so tell us about what's going on with you. I know that you've had some Bigfoot things reported to you. You've had all kinds of things. I know you've heard about all kinds of things.
Well, yeah, because Rick comes by the radio station a lot, and so he tells me little. That's kind of funny because that was probably a couple of years ago when we were talking about it, and you was telling me about something that had happened out at Sulphur Wells.
Here locally, yeah.
And I was like, oh wow.
Well, heck, let's start with that.
Well, see, I kind of take everything from a historical perspective, and I try to do it from a lot of different levels, different stories. We're going to do something on the Bell Witch up in Fulton, Tennessee. There's a place called the Meadows Hotel. We've already done something for it about 3 years ago, and it dates back to the Civil War era, and it has some hauntings in it. So we approach it from the historical perspective.
Have you ever stayed there?
He's invited me to. Bill Campbell is the owner now.
In Fulton, Tennessee. Is that the big hotel that's up on the Court Square, kind of?
And they've refurbished it.
Beautiful.
Oh, it's beautiful. Bill
spent
a fortune to rework it because it was very run down when he found it.
I know exactly where that is.
We did the full interview with him, and he tells some wonderful stories about the guy that did all the shoe shining for everybody, and he dies.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
It's possibly his ghost that's there, and then there's a young debutante that's there.
Oh my goodness, sounds wonderful.
She haunts the building as the story goes. But what got me started on all this from a historical perspective is when I was doing research for my book In the Hills of Tennessee about Jack Henson. There's a period of time that he goes to the Sulphur Wells Academy area, and he puts his family there to hide them out. He's afraid they were going to be killed because there was a price on his head, his family's head. They'd already burnt their house. And so he was trying to find a safe place for them. They had kinfolks that lived in that area, so he brought them there. In my research is when I started stumbling on other information that intrigued me. And then that led me into wanting to know what would be the first Bigfoot sighting on record.
Very cool.
Because I found one here local that we will talk about shortly here. But then you jump back to 1721. 1721 is a long time ago.
Yeah, it was.
Before our country is a country.
Yeah.
The French at that time were the dominant force.
Uh-huh.
And they had set up their works in the New Orleans area. And they were coming up to set up a place in Natchez. And Natchez winds up being one of the oldest settlements, and they claim it's the oldest settlement on the Mississippi River before New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
And
Really?
the Natchez Indians lived there. So a Jesuit priest comes up with the explorers. He comes in with some of the soldiers. The soldiers talk about a sighting. The Jesuit priest is there on Christmas night, 1721. And of course, what the missionaries do, he's trying to convert. He's an evangelist. He's trying to convert the Natchez Indians.
Sure.
So that's what he's there to do. But while he's there, and here's what is said. In his writings, he said, a beast of an unknown species. He said it was extraordinary in bulk. He said, and it made a sound that resembled no other animal.
Wow.
And so that's how he describes what he was seeing, hearing, and the Natchez said, well, that's a common occurrence. The interpreters told the French that that was a common occurrence in that area. So this dates back to 1721 is the earliest writing or what we call written history that we can find in the United States.
And were the Natchez Indians saying that that was a Bigfoot, or what was their word for that? Their terminology.
They called him.
They would have their own
Hairy Man.
something of that nature.
Different names.
But all nationalities, whether they're Christian or not, they have a good and evil thought.
Right.
And so to them, they feared it. Because it always seemed to appear at night, and it was something they feared.
Weird.
But from what I gather, it was large, hairy, and unlike any other creature.
Yeah.
The bear in the area, this seemed to be even larger than some of the black bear that were in the area. So this gave them pause, and of course they didn't like the black bear too well either. Because they would get into camp and mess things up.
They were stating that it had a howl that was unlike anything else. So they weren't mistaking it for the black bear or for a grizzly or something.
So and that's just what sets it aside from any other animal or any other creature in the area.
Because everybody talks about
the screech that they hear.
That it's so guttural.
Yes. And the knocking on it knocks on the trees and things like that. Yeah, it does have a very, very weird sound.
So, how we look and call things today, we call them Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and things like that.
Yeti.
Of course, Sasquatch comes from a Native American term, but what they called it specifically, we don't have that recorded, but they just called it a big hairy creature, and that's how it's recorded by the French Jesuits. So.
Wow.
That is the first sighting. And then what I found unusual is we actually have a sighting here in Henry County, and it comes from a preacher.
Oh my goodness.
He was a circuit rider for the Mormon Church. Now we think of the Methodist Church being the only circuit riders, but the Mormon Church had circuit riders also. And so this guy literally rides all over the country. Most of his churches are in Kentucky. He's starting to set up satellite churches in Tennessee, and he's working his way south.
And that's him on screen there, I see.
That's David W. Patton, and he worked his way south and set up a place called Sulphur Wells Academy. And to this very day, you can go out the Lake Highway and you can find,
and there it is, yeah.
You can find Sulphur Wells Academy Road that takes you to Sulphur Wells Church of Christ.
Oh.
And on past that is where Sulphur Wells Academy would have been located. It was near a little town called Sandy, not to be confused with Big Sandy. So Sandy was a small community. From what we gather, it's underwater as well as the well.
Oh, wow.
And there's a picture of them at the well.
To give you a quick history of how Sulphur Wells came to be, this was all Chickasaw land. This entire area was the Chickasaw Indians. As the white settlers came into Stewart County, they stopped at the Tennessee River. Then they began to expand a little bit, and so they had a peace treaty with the Chickasaw. They bought the land in 1821 or 1820, and then the Chickasaw moved in 1821, some of the locals began to settle the area. They found some surface salt, and they thought this may be a good place for a salt lick or a salt mine.
Oh, yeah.
So they began to dig and drill, and when they did, they hit an artesian well. When the water came up, it had a sulfuric smell. And so they established a sulfur well, which a lot of people, if you know what sulfur drugs are, we talk about sulfur drugs today.
Yes.
Well, the sulfur water they felt had medicinal purposes.
And it
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
And so they began
stinks,
that far
too.
back to set up the well for medicinal purposes.
Oh.
And so then a settlement began to grow in that area called Sandy, and then eventually some of the Mormons drifted through here, and they set up a satellite church, and it was called the Sulphur Wells Academy, which served as a school as well as a church.
Wow. And now that academy's underwater.
All that area is
that
basically
isn't-
underwater.
That is so sad.
Have divers gone under there to?
No, but there are days that you can go. There's a little cove right in there, and you can see the artesian well. You can still see it bubbling.
Oh my goodness,
So,
really?
yeah.
So
For
it's
real.
still happening.
We've got to
That's-
go on a field trip.
Yeah.
Do you field trip sometime? Go back in there.
So
Yeah.
is it mainly like when the water level drops in
You
the
can see
fall?
it better when it drops.
Okay.
It's best when the water level is low
Okay.
to see it. So that's your best bet when it drops.
You
down
could
to
probably
something.
smell it as well, because sulfur is not a pretty smell.
And it's white bubbles because it's, sulfur water is
Yeah.
milky.
Milky,
so it's,
yeah.
So it's a white bubble.
Definitely.
It's easy to see.
That's very interesting.
That is very
So,
interesting.
so that's something that still exists to this very day. But as I kept studying about the hills of Tennessee, and I kept finding this story about this David Patton, and he had this interesting story, and I'll kind of give you his account. He was headed back from Benton County. Supposedly, he had been at a church service in that area. He was staying with a man by the name of Abraham
Smoot?
Smoot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's-
Abraham O. Smoot.
Oh, Smoot.
And Abraham Smoot actually had a residence set up there, and he did the memoirs. It's in his memoirs of this recollection. So when David Patton arrives at his house, he tells the story, and Abraham Smoot, he records it. And this is according to what Mr. Smoot wrote in reference to what Reverend Patton was to see that evening on his way back. He said, "I suddenly noticed a very strange personage walking beside me for about 2 miles. His head was about even with my shoulders as I sat in my saddle."
Oh, wow, that's
He was
high.
riding
He was huge.
He was riding his horse. Mr. Patton,
So that's
Reverend
like
Patton's
a
riding his horse,
12-foot.
and this creature walks beside him and looks him eye to eye.
Oh, my goodness.
And he said he wore no clothing. He was covered with hair. His skin was very dark. And he said he had no home. He said he was a wanderer of the earth. He said that he was
Wow.
very miserable,
Yikes.
and he earnestly sought death because he was a lone man. But he could not die. His mission was to destroy the souls of men. And David Patton took this as him charging forward, moving forward, that this was something he's just going to have to face. Later on in some of his memoirs, he talks about all the experiences he has, that he felt that this was a moment as a challenge, that no matter what he has to face, his ministry must go forward.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how he was looking at it.
Right.
As explanation began to filter through who was this man, it is also said that he called his name out, that I am Cain.
Ah, he called himself Cain,
And so
this
Patton,
big hairy man.
so Patton at this time begins to question, look back at the Bible,
Cain and Abel.
and he finds
Right.
that Cain was, once he killed his brother, what
Yes.
happened? He was cast out.
He was cast out.
And what was his body description? He was
A hairy man.
A hairy
He
man.
was very hairy,
That's
wasn't he?
Wow.
biblical.
He was very hairy.
That's why so many
So
people
we could
talk about
actually-
the connection of
Yeah.
Bigfoot in the Bible.
Now,
Yeah.
is this connection Cain and Bigfoot? The Mormon Church is always asked, is is this doctrine? Is this something that the Mormon Church recognizes as part of their doctrine? That's a no.
Yeah, probably not.
That's a no. But is it in their archives? Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's in their archives.
So it's documented.
And there's multiple incidents. Not only Patton, but even Wesley, which is
his son,
Joseph Smith.
Oh yeah, Joseph
Smith was a prophet of the church. His son Wesley Smith was in Hawaii on a mission trip. This is before Hawaii was a vacation place. So it was really a mission field at the time. He wasn't there for the fun of it. It was really a mission field because they would hand you your head back, and it was kind of not a nice place. The Polynesians would mess you up if you didn't treat them right. But anyway, he said a man came through the door. He was tall enough that he had to stoop to enter. Now, this is Wesley Smith describing. His eyes were protruding, and he looked very wild, had long fingernails that were very thick. He presented a rather unkempt appearance and wore no clothing at all. Then suddenly appeared in his right hand a light that was the size of a dagger. A voice said, "This is your priesthood." He commanded the person in the name of the Lord Jesus to depart. This is Wesley speaking back to the creature. He wanted this creature to depart. Immediately the light appeared, the person stopped, or disappeared, the person stopped when he was commanded to leave, and he backed out the doorway. So this is the account of Wesley Smith talking to his father, and it's written down, and this is part of things that are in the archives of the Mormon Church.
You can't make that stuff up.
No.
Why would they?
Sure.
Yeah,
and a
very,
lot of this,
very crazy.
And a lot of the early on in the church, what they were trying to do, as it's explained to me by some of the Latter-day Saints writing, they tried to explain it as, yes, there's multiple myths, legends, and things that took place, but it was the clergy trying to show that they did face evil, so they were using Cain or this creature as something evil. This is how they're looking at it, that they had to overcome in their ministry. So that seems to be kind of the sight or the vision that a lot of them use when they use Cain. And Cain's name pops up in about 4 or 5 other accounts by other individuals that say that they had an encounter also.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Was it really Cain? Was it more of the Sasquatch Bigfoot creature that we envision? Are they the same? So there's some questions. What was seen here? I think David Patton felt it was possibly Cain. That's how he states it. So that's what he felt.
Because he had that, he converted with him.
Yeah.
Conversed, yeah.
Yeah, conversed,
Yes,
yeah. They have a conversation, eye contact, and it was, I think they rode side by side for 2 miles. So it's not just a casual, so for a full 2 miles, this man's walking beside him. Can you imagine what the horse is doing? That horse is probably snorting and
thinking, what the heck?
The sidewalk and everything else.
Yeah.
So. But if the horse, they sense everything, so I guess if the horse was at peace, I guess he just...
And in a different version of this, I also noticed he talked about a smell, but of course that would be a natural thing for somebody that's
you're running around
hairy, that's got hair from head to toe, and you're going to have have that type of smell.
It's interesting to have an account that far back of somebody that wasn't considered crazy, but just religious, What year was that? You said it was 1827?
1827.
1827.
I believe in 1827 when that particular incident takes place.
And thank God people took notes.
Yeah.
See, I'm a journaler, so I mean, I try to do that.
Had it not been for Abraham Smoot, we would not have had this particular
incident. You wouldn't even know about
reported.
it. And I wonder how many people didn't do that, didn't document what they saw or heard.
And as you do your research, you'll find that in the Latter-day Saints, there's several books that they note that's written about these incidents, and of course David Patton is one of them that they always highlight the most.
Now, something very interesting is you don't really find anything that would be similar to this in the Bible, but then in the Book of Enoch and some of the other books that have been written that are not a part of the 66 canons, there are some pretty bizarre things written about what was seen and things like that. So that's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, the lost books of the Bible.
The giants, and the Nephilim, and things like that. And I know a lot of Christians that I've even spoken to aren't really aware of all of that in the book of Genesis. Seems like it's all recorded, it's all there, and by God himself. So, these things actually did happen, and these giants, this could have been something that came later, I don't know, and maybe Cain was out there. And
I just think it frames an interesting story, and I'd like to work on that premise of it being Cain sometime, and maybe produce a movie or something around that sometime, just around that concept.
Very interesting. And the other thing that I must say, when Kevin and I saw what we saw, well, he was with me, I actually was the one that saw in the Green Swamp in Florida.
Right.
This was a massively big, hairy, very tall creature.
Well, just look
with a head
you.
that was just sitting right on its shoulders. It had no neck whatsoever. It was just this big, huge, massive black thing. And his steps back into the thick of the palms, bushes, and all that was there. If you've ever been in Florida, that is very thick in there. He just took 2 really huge steps back, and he was already, that's how big his legs were. It was already had him where I could barely see him in the shadowing of that 6:30-ish kind of evening in the winter. So, it's just really cool. There's a Bigfoot right behind me. They're about that big, that's about what it would have been.
Yeah.
So, you're thinking
huge.
They're huge.
Take a little bit of a curve off the road a little bit and take another path.
Yeah.
On some of the other writings that I find, they're talking about if this is a myth, if it really didn't happen, referring to Cain, is it Cain or is it not Cain? Some question the fact during the Great Flood, nothing survived, only Noah and his family.
Right.
So apparently he would have been taken in the Great Flood. So how could he still be here?
He went in the inner
I have an
earth.
answer for you.
The inner earth.
So that's a question that has been raised.
I wouldn't think that, but what I would think is that the Nephilim are known to be 2 species: angelic, a fallen angel, which would be considered demonic, and then also human, because it came through the woman. Okay, so you've got a human and an angelic. Perhaps that gave them the ability to supersede that issue, that they weren't killed. Humans were killed, and that is documented in the Bible. Right. And I'm not questioning, and saying that, the Bible had it wrong. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that this is something that may not have been addressed because it's not a salvation issue. The Bible is clearly a book about salvation and, where we go from here. So this may just be one of those issues not, spoken about or directed through the scriptures. Or perhaps it's in a book we don't have privy to,
Yeah.
So I don't know, but it's a very interesting concept.
And here's another interesting sidebar.
Okay.
If Cain is the root or the genesis of Bigfoot, Sasquatch,
Right.
taking the line of he is on earth, he is by himself, did he, through the course of the many years that he's here, did he mate?
Well.
And if he did mate, what was his offspring? What did they look like?
Right.
So that's also
question.
That's also questions and a hypothesis that's been presented. So
Right.
it's like, it has some merit.
Yeah.
Is it true? Who knows? But it has merit.
It does. And in this think tank thought, one thing that could have happened is because of the Nephilim, which this was a very unnatural pairing to the human woman. perhaps something was born of them that he could have mated with.
Possibly.
So, there are a lot of questions to be asked, and it doesn't hurt to ask a question. It's just really interesting.
Just a different
It's a
way of
good
looking
thought.
at it.
But that's the fun part. It gets the mind churning and makes you want to think.
You can get creative here.
Yeah.
You can get creative, but I like facts.
Yeah.
I like facts. So I would be digging.
And that's the reason I like to stick to the historical.
But I mean, who knows what's factual anymore?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, really.
Well,
you know,
the Bible
you
is
can
factual.
get diluted.
I mean, people that have eyewitness accounts that wrote it down, what they saw, to me, that's pretty factual. But
Could be. Yeah.
It's their account, now how accurate is the account?
Saw. Yeah.
Because as a studier of the Civil War,
right,
I can read the northern account of something that took place and read the southern account, and it's almost like, boy, there's a big difference here. There's a
really?
big information gap.
It's all perception.
Okay.
It's all perception.
It is a perception, huh?
Yeah, so that's some of the things I do find as I study history. But the fact that in 1721 we have a first sighting, and then we have a sighting here local, it just brings to question.
And here's what's
It's gotta
funny.
be something to it.
I have 2 friends that live in that area
Right.
that have activity as we speak.
Yes, that's very interesting stuff, isn't it?
I've just not, I've just not pursued them. It's like,
In the self-awareness
come on,
area?
you need to tell us more of your story.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And more than that.
We got to get that story.
Yes.
We got to work on those stories.
Yeah. We're on a mission now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so what more? This was great. This was
Yep.
great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, I think that, trying to keep it to a historical perspective, I think that's always the most fun, because it gives it some validity and tries to flesh it out to where you can wrap your mind around it a little bit more. Because if the whole seeing is believing thing, if you haven't seen it, for some people, then it's hard for them to believe it. But when you take actual recollections from a bygone era, and at that time they weren't Bigfoot crazy. This is an era to where that they didn't know what this was. This is just
They're trying to figure
new
it out.
creature. This is something new to them.
Right.
And especially in 1721, on Christmas, this Jesuit priest, he's there to convert the Natchez Indians. And the Natchez Indians were at war with a tribe next door, so there's war parties always active in the area, so he's on pins and needles, making sure that he keeps his hair,
But all the Indians
Keeps his hair.
all the Indians know about Bigfoot.
They do.
They do, because
Yeah.
they were walking the
Skinwalker.
earth. I say they
Yeah.
were the smartest people
Yeah.
on the earth.
They have a couple of things that they could never figure out or really know what it was all about, and that's the skinwalker. And a lot of people have seen that as well, and that's a really frightening thing, the skinwalker.
And with, like I said, with the Jesuit, it was new for him, but the Natchez Indians said, well, this is just a common occurrence.
Exactly.
Right,
It's a common
right.
occurrence.
We hear this
and
all
he
the
shows
time.
up at night, and we hear him, and
And that
we see
is
him
a
on occasion.
fact. I mean, a lot of the reports that you get and you hear about, it is an evening kind of a thing. Although we saw ours, I saw mine, I should
There's
say.
a lot of daytime
Like
sightings.
6:30ish going on, more maybe 7, quarter to 7, and but I mean that was the evening was coming, and all the cows had gone to this big sinkhole, and here he is, and we just happened to walk up on it. We weren't out Bigfoot hunting; we were just out looking. Because we heard the cowbell, and these cows were massive big. They were some of the biggest cows I think I've ever laid my eyes on. I never saw anything that big.
Right.
And if it wouldn't have been for the bell that he had on him, he would get loose, and he would go down to this water, thing to drink at night. And if we heard the bell, we wanted to go out and see him, and we did. And then we got a whole lot more than seeing the cows that night. It was really
You were
quite
lucky.
frightening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was afraid to sleep that night. I was afraid if it's out there, it'll keep coming, But we never saw it again.
No.
Yeah. So, how long have you been Mr. History Highway?
Well, we started all this in 2019. We started doing our first pilot show right before COVID came upon us.
Oh boy.
And we were finishing the editing. We started shooting in 2019, and we were trying to finish there in April to get it to where we could start shopping it around to, we had some people at Discovery Channel and History Channel both interested at the time. And so we were going to try to present it to them, and then, as you well know, that's the month that COVID said we're going to have our first lockdown. And it never went away for that whole 2-year period. And so all the networks instantly overnight changed on how they did business.
That's right.
So all the contacts went away because everybody goes from working in an office, working at home. So a lot of people that's working at home eventually quit job positions, and everything begins to change, and so all my contacts went away. And so I decided, what am I going to do? And I decided to get my own editing equipment and started putting it together myself. And
Good
so
move.
as the show was assembled, then I started putting it out on YouTube, and then from that, somebody in Natchez, Mississippi saw some of the shows and said, I'll help air them. And from that, AME TV was kind of sprouted out of that, and so we now have our own channel on Roku and Amazon Fire.
That is awesome. Yes, you do.
And so it's on AME?
AME TV, and you just type in AME TV. As soon as you turn on Amazon Fire or Roku, you have a search engine, and you type in that search engine.
I have all Rokus.
Just type in AME TV. You don't have to put the dash in it, just AME T. As soon as you hit the T, it usually pops up, and just click on the logo. Just switch servers, so right now the old logo's up, but the new logo has AME TV. Below it, it says American Music and Entertainment Television.
Okay.
That's the new server. They're trying to get the old one taken down. We're just in transition right now.
Well, have you ever had any of your own really spooky things happen?
Yeah. Most of it's all Civil War related mainly.
Oh, I love it. Let's hear it.
My first one, though, was actually on an Indian reservation in Cairo, Georgia, back when Jimmy Carter was in office, and that tells you how far back. Well,
yeah, and he saw a UFO.
Yeah,
the
and
Peanut
so
Man. Yeah.
We were in Cairo, Georgia, and it wasn't too far from Poulange, Georgia. That would always tickle me, Poulange, Georgia. But anyway, we lived on the Indian reservation, Creek Indian Reservation, for a while. And we had put a band together, and we were working together. The guy that, Chief Neil McCormick, which played with the original Hank Williams Sr. band. He played the steel guitar and a couple of instruments with Hank Sr. He was the chief of the little tribe there. And his son is who I was working with, and Neil Jr., and we were putting a band together. And so I got to stay on the Indian reservation. And his mother would always talk about different things that were going on at the reservation and about their ancestors and how active sightings were, because this was the original land. They got to reoccupy the original land where their ancestors lived. They had a big rotunda where they had their dances and everything. And so we were actually in there one day, and she was telling us about what all took place, and talked about one of the ancestors that was a very proud warrior and had a very magnificent horse, and she described the horse and the whole 9 yards. And so several days go by, and there's this storm brewing, and me and some of my friends, we decided to go out and check out the storm. So we're checking out the storm, and there's a big draw past the rotunda, and I was walking along the edge. It's probably a 30-foot drop, and I was walking along the edge, and I could see a campfire down there. And around the campfire, there's ceremonial dancing, and this guy's riding his horse on the outside of the circle, and he's got his war lance and whooping and hollering. And I said, wow, who would be up this time of night? And so all this goes on, and so I went back to the house.
Other than you.
Yeah, I said, I want to go back, and I went to, and Neil's mom and dad were gone on vacation, and Neil was in the council house. It was the chieftain's house by himself, and I opened the door. As soon as I opened the door, the wind blew it back, and it popped up against the wall, and Neil was walking up toward the door, and he had a .32 caliber pistol, Smith & Wesson, and on the bar, top of the bar, that thing was spinning around.
Oh my goodness.
And he walked over and put his hand over, stopped it, and so I said, who's down in the draw? I said, where's everybody? And he said, well, it can't be none of us. Some of the boys
in the rain?
And they had a big limousine. If you can imagine, they had a big black limousine, and that's how they'd go into town. So most of the guys had left in the big limousine. He said, there's nobody here. I said, well, you can come with me. And we got back over there, and there was nothing there. I said, well, I swear there was people dancing down there. There was a campfire. And he says, there's nothing down there now. I said, well, I saw it. And he said, can you describe it? And I began to describe it. And he says, well. So his mom gets back. She says, better show you something.
Oh.
She gets back, and I began to describe what I saw. And she said, well, let me show you this picture. And she showed me an art rendering of her ancestor. And
Oh, wow.
On his horse,
who it
running
was.
around that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
Very
that was
cool.
kind of cool.
That is very cool.
That's kind of a cool incident. And then on the battlefields all across the country, all the Civil War battlefields, we constantly run across sightings and things. Parker's Crossroads. Lord have mercy. There's one night we were there, and once again we could feel the change in temperature as we were walking down the path toward the mass burial area where a lot of the Union soldiers were buried. And as we're walking toward it, we feel a little temperature shift as we're walking toward it.
Got cooler.
Yeah, we feel that little shift, and it's like, and then we actually felt a shift in the breeze a little bit. And then I felt a little hot wind hit me in the face, and I said, God, this is just strange. And as we got closer to the burial ground, we saw activity around the burial ground. So, and we've seen things like that at Shiloh. We were up in East Tennessee.
Is there anything like that around this area?
Parker's Crossroads not that far. It's near Lexington, so it's
just
maybe an hour drive from here. 45 minutes to an hour drive.
Nothing really came this far over, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You're surrounded by it. Tennessee is
Yeah.
Tennessee is second to Virginia for the amount of battles.
Right.
We're only second to Virginia. We had more battles than any other state besides Virginia.
Do you know of any
Really?
accounts that
I
have
did
been
not
written
know
about
that.
Paris with that type of activity?
We had a battle here called the Battle of Paris. It was a small battle, but we had a battle here with casualties, and that's going out toward Tecumseh. What used to
Wow.
be Tecumseh, whatever that factory is now.
Oh, okay.
Wow, that's interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we
it's a-
have tons of history in the area. Fort Donaldson has history.
Oh,
and-
yeah.
Oh,
and
Fort
there's
Donaldson, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So.
sightings there too. So there's Civil War battlegrounds because it was such a horrendous type of war. The warfare was just, it was Napoleonic. They actually stood in lines, fired at each other.
Yeah.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
it was brutal and
Yeah.
bloody. And so some of the men there at Fort Donaldson, the weather overnight, it went from 70 degrees weather to drop down to 18 degrees. And a lot of the men were not prepared for it. Some of the Union soldiers cast their greatcoats, which was an outer coat, and some of their backpacks, they threw them to the side of the road, marching from Fort Henry to Fort Donaldson. And so it was 70 degrees. They were getting
Right.
hot, so they threw it
Oh,
to the
dear.
side of the road, abandoned their warm gear, and then that night it began to snow and sleet.
My
Oh, my
goodness.
And so some of them froze to death.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
some of those didn't die a very pleasant life. And
No.
No, it was really,
so
really difficult.
that is probably the explanation for some of the hauntings that you see around
Oh,
some
yeah.
of these
That's so
battlegrounds in
tragic.
Tennessee. Tennessee's full of them. Gettysburg, they have sightings
my
there
goodness.
constantly.
Yeah.
Salem Church was the church in East Tennessee, and we were there doing a church service in a church that was there during the war. It was a Union hospital and a Confederate both, but it was a Union hospital. There were still blood stains on the floor. In the graveyard,
wow.
there were soldiers buried in the graveyard, and we had the service there. And that night, that graveyard was active,
Really?
very active. So yeah. From a historical perspective, yeah, I've been exposed to a lot of different things. In the Meadows Hotel, I want to go back there and check it out. And that particular hotel was originally built by somebody in the Confederate Army.
Wow.
After the war, he started the Meadows Hotel.
Wow.
He was a part of
So you've spent the
Confederate
night in that
cavalry group.
hotel.
Yes. It's,
Anything bizarre happen through the night?
yes. The bed sheet, the bed sheeting goes off on the floor.
Oh, wow.
Towels come up missing or out on the floor, flying through the air.
Oh my goodness.
Things like that, yeah. So that's some of the recorded things that take place there. Some of the maids have talked about, I swear I put that roll of toilet paper there. Where'd it go?
Yeah. Things go missing.
And it's kind of crazy.
The other person took it down the hall.
It's just kind of crazy, though.
Yeah.
And you know when you get spooked, then
Yes.
anything can happen.
Everything.
Because your mind's running
is
and
haunted.
racing.
Oh, yeah.
So you start inventing things happening.
Yes.
But there's enough stories from the Meadows Hotel. It'd be fun sometime for you guys to go there. I think you'd enjoy it. Bill Campbell will give you a great tour.
It's beautiful.
Great
It's
tour.
so pretty.
Absolutely, it's on.
There's
it's
a
on our
little
list.
cafe across the street from it. Actually, they used to be a client of mine. I used to call on them, and I used to love to, because I'd park between it and the hotel.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, I would definitely like to go see that. We'll have to do a little road trip.
Yeah.
I know, we want a tour bus.
Yeah, you need to do that.
Yeah, it's going to be purple with Paris Paranormal on it.
Yeah, we keep asking everybody out there, if you've got a tour bus for us, let's have it.
Go on the road.
We need it. Yeah.
I think you need to put the show on the road. I really do.
I
We
think
do.
that would be so much
Yes,
fun.
we definitely will.
Yeah, I think you
Time
need
is
to.
coming for that to happen.
mean-
Well, you know, now this little piece of land we're on, the little 2 acres over here, I was told that that was a meeting place for the Indians. I don't know if it was the Chickasaws
It
or
would
the
have been probably the
Natchez or
Chickasaws.
who it was, but there was a spring on our property, a well or a spring or something on our property, and they would come and the other Indians would meet there. This is what I've been told, and by another historian in town. And he told me that that area has a lot of deaths. It has a lot of trauma. Things have happened because of the Indians not being here, and they had been moved and all this. But that area was a kind of a sacred place. And we actually did have kind of a skinwalker issue in I think it was the second year we were here. Very, very frightening. Yes, Nikki and Jason had shared that with us and what they had seen. And
Right.
yes, and we were told that there is buried people on our property. Now, I'm not digging it up to find out.
Yeah, the
But
last thing you want to do is build your house over a graveyard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was because of like the 1600s,
Yeah,
things like
that
that.
can
That
happen.
happened.
And
Right.
don't build on Native American land.
No,
No.
that's a no-no for darn sure.
Yeah,
You don't want to do that.
no.
And so now I'm thinking, but that was kind of a sacred little spot, and we got a house on it with a barn and another little outhouse, and I don't know what was built on there. Of course, I wasn't anywhere around here. We didn't know anything about that. But have you ever heard anything about that little area?
Not that particular area, no.
Okay, I'm real interested in it. I did go down and look in the archives here at the Historical Center, looking at things, but couldn't find a whole lot about it.
And to make something perfectly clear, I don't go looking for these things.
Yeah,
They just find
exactly.
me.
They
I don't
find
go
you.
looking for any of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like when I told you I was doing research for In the Hills of Tennessee and a story about Jack Henson. Unrelated, here comes this story about David Patton. So it's just by accident I begin to find
Yeah.
all these things. I'm in Natchez, Mississippi. I've started my new television show and working with the people down in Natchez, Mississippi. I'm introduced to the Natchez culture, the Indians that live there, and then all of a sudden, boom,
Yeah.
here's another story.
Interesting.
So I don't
It's
go looking for it.
synchronicity.
It all finds me.
You just got to keep riding the wave.
Yeah, and then next week we're going over to Adams, Tennessee, and
Ooh,
we're going
the
to
Bell Witch.
meet with you, and we're going to talk to him about the Bell Witch.
That would be
But we're
Dewey
going
Edwards.
to take it
Yeah.
more from the standpoint that everybody calls it the Bell Witch, but it
That's
really
Native
was,
American land too.
Yeah, it sure is.
It is. Oh yeah, all that is. The entire state of Tennessee was Cherokee land. And that's where the Chickasaw and Choctaw come from. As time passed, two brothers in that split apart, and you got the Chickasaw Choctaw
My
tribes.
great-great-grandmother.
Oh, very interesting.
My great-grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee.
Yay.
So that if you look back at the old maps, you can see that the entire state was Cherokee before it became a state, with the exception of right north of Reelfoot Lake, there was some Chickamaugas there. A very small patch of Chickamaugas.
I hadn't heard that one.
And and some of the Chickamaugas also were down south of Chattanooga, where the Chickamauga River is. That's where they actually got their name.
Okay, all right.
It's from the Chickamauga River. Now, well, they named the river Creek down there.
Yep.
Very neat.
So they were the ones you didn't want to mess with. Chickamaugas. Cherokee didn't want to mess with them. They were all kin to one another, but you didn't mess with the Cherokee.
Well,
And
on
the
my dad's side, my great-great-grandmother was full-blood Apache, and she was in Geronimo's tribe.
Goodness. Oh, how very cool.
And with the Creek Indians that I was when I lived on the reservation, they were of one sect in Alabama when Crockett was part of the Indian Wars there before the Battle of New Orleans took place. General Jackson formed a group to tackle the Creek Indians. It was the Red Stick Creek, and they were the most feared. They were from South Alabama, in that region, and they were a different branch of Cherokee. A Creek altogether.
Yeah.
And so the Red Stick Creeks, they would come in and kill other creeks that were a lot of times friendly to the American.
There's so many tribes.
What they would do, they would
just
have
so
the big
many.
tribe, and then somebody would migrate to another area and split off, just like we do
Yeah,
here,
just
and
like
start
we
another
do.
community, or a
Right.
church splits and
Yeah,
starts another
right.
church over here. Native Americans
Yeah.
did very similar things, so
Yep.
not unheard of. It was more common than unheard of. So, but
Very
that's-
interesting stuff,
Yeah,
though.
it is. So history, the more you study it, you don't have to go looking for it; it finds you.
And your History Highway won some awards.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
kind of
let's
neat.
talk about that.
We had never in my life, till this year, I started entering things. I don't know why. I entered my song "Father of the Blues." Well, actually, I do know why. A friend of mine called, T.J. Cates, and he said, we're going to be working with the Mississippi Music Awards this year. And he said, why don't you enter that "Father of the Blues" song? He had seen it in one of my History Highway shows. When I was doing a thing in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, I wrote a song just for W.C. Handy, and he said, why don't you enter that song? I said, okay. I said, do you see that list of names that are Mississippi blues people, that are real blues people? And I won Best Mississippi Blues Song.
Yay!
So that started it.
That's
Awesome.
awesome.
And so I thought, well, let's just keep seeing what happens. So I kept entering contest after contest after contest. And I kept thinking, well, I've got this kind of cool video we've just done on Muscle Shoals Sound. I said, why don't I tackle the film festivals and see what happens? So I started entering Muscle Shoals Sound in film festivals. And I thought, well, why not enter History Highway and just see what happens? So I entered it in, some for Best TV Pilot, some for Best TV Show. And I won one for Best Pilot and 4 for Best Series.
That is so awesome.
So you never know.
Congratulations.
And one of them is in Paris, France, and the other one is in Rome, Italy. So
Good
these, and they're all connected to the Cannes Film Festival. So will it make it past this? Who knows?
Yes,
This is,
It looks like you're on a roll.
yeah, it's just new. It's all new for me because I've worked all these years and never got much of anything. Just a little something here, a little crumbs. I got crumbs, of course. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like floodgates have opened up. It's
Yeah, that's
kind of nice.
wonderful.
But I'm proud of that History Highway finally got some recognition because it's a fun show. If you've ever seen it, if you haven't, the premise is that we travel on a 55 Chevy and we pull up to these road markers. And if you notice, in Henry County, we have a lot of these metal signs around the courthouse and everywhere else.
Right.
They mentioned the Battle of Paris a while
That's
ago.
right.
There's a sign beside the road headed out toward the old Tecumseh plant. Talks about the Battle of Paris. Well, there's nearly
I
140,000.
saw that the other day and thought, I've never noticed that sign there.
Yeah.
And it's been there the whole time.
When I first did a survey, it was 128,000, and since then it's gotten up closer to 140,000 signs that's been erected in the United States that talk about something historical that happened in that location. So basically what we do, we'll take and drive up to that sign, I peel back the layers of the onion and tell you what happened
that's
there.
cool.
Oh, that is so
And
nice.
That's
so,
cool.
Yeah, and so a lot of these historical landmarks, I'll go to them, but I try to pick out the ones that are lesser known.
Yeah.
If I do pick out one like the Bell Witch, I take it from a whole different approach. When you say Bell Witch, you're thinking, woo, ride a broom. Well, it's more of a paranormal ghost story.
Yes, it is. That's
So
right.
that's the approach we take, more to what the local lore and what the
Yes.
local people have lived with since that period in 1800s.
Right.
So that's what we try to tell is those stories. And when I did the story in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, you'd think, well, it's just going to be about Fame Studio and all the things that took place. more modern, yes, I touched on some of that. But then we dug up W.C. Handy, and this man is born in the 1800s, and he's a black gentleman that grew up. His dad was a Baptist preacher. He grows up and wants to play music. His daddy said, no, I don't want you playing that terrible music. If you play in church, you can play, but don't play anything else. And he became the father of the blues.
Isn't that amazing?
Blues / jazz.
Yeah.
He played the trumpet, so you hear Louis Armstrong play.
Yeah.
Louis Armstrong learned from him.
Oh, wow.
He learned from W.C. Handy.
That's saying something.
Yeah, that's who showed him how to do it.
Sure good.
So,
Wow.
So that was another story I stumbled on when I was there.
Everybody has a story.
Everybody has a story.
Does.
Everybody has a story.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to do with History Highway, is to tell those lesser known stories and sing the praises of people that have been forgotten for the most part.
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
So what exactly are you and Dewey Edwards, the Dudester, what are y'all going to be doing?
Dudester.
Well, I want him to carry me to the home place, the Bell Witch home place.
Is Elijah going also? Elijah Henderson?
He mentioned it. We don't know yet, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I love.
Well, we could always go too.
Yeah, we're going to go to
Field
the
trip.
grave site, but he should kind of take me on the grand tour of Bell Witch area. So
That's very
show me
cool.
what all.
Adams, Tennessee is the spot. That's for
I
sure.
I want people to see things that they normally don't get.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So he's going to try to take me to all those places that
Right.
haven't been covered, and he wrote a book on it. So
Yeah.
See, that was the first book that I read that
Isn't
I
that
remember as a kid in the library. That just opened my mind up that there was so much more.
And Dewey's another one of those that's been around reenactments and things all his life
Yes,
too.
he has.
He's
And
fixing to do a movie.
And a lot of Civil War stuff, so he kind of grew out of, from that. He's evolved
Yes.
and broadened his base a whole lot. So,
Very
yeah,
interesting.
he's become kind of the authority on the Bell Witch and a lot of things in that neck of the woods, as they say.
That's
Yep.
right.
He is.
Well, these have been some really interesting stories,
Well, thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just an everyday life for me. That's just what I do every day, literally what I do every
Yeah.
day.
Well, history is so interesting. And to find out the facts about something, I'm still just really wanting to know more about the house, because we have had so
It's a
many
beautiful home.
experiences in that house. Just absolutely crazy. And I want to know why. Why would something specific happen? Like the night I was alone with the kids downstairs. I was upstairs alone, and I'm sound asleep. We'd never lived in a house with 10 fireplaces before. It was 18 degrees outside, so we left one on. And I was so afraid. I knew for sure that could cause a fire. And the house is made of wood, and I'd never lived in a wood house, being from Florida. We have concrete homes. And it was just so bizarre. And in the middle of the night, I'm sound asleep. Kevin's in Florida working in Tampa. And I feel my leg, I believe it was my left leg, being pulled very hard. Like I felt hands around my leg and pulling. And I felt like it was my son Jason saying, "Get up, there's a fire." I mean, that's the first thing my mind went to from a sound sleep is, "Oh, it caught on fire," So I turned over to tell Jason, "I'm up, where's the fire? Is there a fire?" And there was not one person in that room. I was alone in that room. All the lights were off. It was pitch dark. Not a soul. The door hadn't opened or closed. And I don't know how that happened. And I'm like, why would something like that happen? What did that? What was the purpose of that? It would seem that there would even have to be a purpose in hauntings.
Right.
Why?
We got time for one more.
Got it.
Let me throw this one
I
at you.
reminded you of something.
Yes, you did. Believe it or not, there is a Sacramento, Kentucky, and it is named after Sacramento, California.
Okay.
After the gold rush kind of simmered down, the 49 gold rush, a lot of the people that were burned out and didn't strike it rich, they came back home to Kentucky. So this little area became Sacramento, Kentucky. Sacramento, Kentucky eventually became the site of one of Nathan Bedford Forrest's first battles. It was his first victory. There were some casualties. There's a house along the main drive that was involved as the story goes, is a hospital. Somebody is to have died in there. And so I'm filming. I'm actually doing a movie, Shallow Many Faces of War, and it's a pretty big storyline, so it actually covers Sacramento, Kentucky, and some of Forrest's escapades there. And so I asked to spend the night in the home because I wanted the next morning to wake up and film, catch the sunrise coming through the window. Mm-hmm. So the ladies that were the curators over the house said, yes, you can stay here. We have no problem with that. He said, we have this bed in there. You can just put your sleeping bag on top of the bed and sleep on that bed. It's one of the beds that came with it. And I thought, oh, this is going to be cool. I get to sleep in a,
Was you there all by yourself?
period bed, and my camera equipment was set up over here to my side, already up on its tripod and everything.
You were doing a ghost show and didn't know it.
Yeah.
And so I'm in here, and I thought, well, I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to wake up the next morning and shoot this scene. So I'm laying in bed, kind of pondering the scene, and I'm beginning to drift off as I'm pondering the scene for the next morning I'm going to shoot. And I'm sound asleep. I have been working all day long. I do a lot of my own camera work, so I've been toting that rascal around all day. And so it's like, yeah, I'm ready to put it between the sheets or inside that sleeping bag. So I was sleeping good. And have you ever had somebody to lean over you and breathe in your face?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh,
you feel their breath on your face? Mm-hmm. Have you ever felt breath on your face?
Sure.
No.
So while I'm laying there asleep, I'm feeling breath on my face.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm going, so I peek out and I look. There's nobody there. There's nobody, there's nothing, but I'm feeling the temperature pitch change in the room entirely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm still feeling this in my face. And I'm going, oh, and I feel a pressure on my chest. I know what's happening. Mm-hmm. So I said, I mean you no harm. And I says, I know your story. I know how you died, why you died. And I mean you no harm. I'm just here to take a nice night's sleep. Please leave me alone. It went away.
It did. Very good.
It went away.
Wow. So how do you think it was?
When I described the incident, they said, well, that's not uncommon. Most everybody that's around this house has a similar type of experience. And we've actually had some local people to sleep in the house and have this similar type of experience. And so they all feel it's that person that died in the house at the aftermath of the war, of that battle. So somebody was wounded and died in the house. So they felt that was probably who it was. So,
and you went right to sleep?
It took me a little bit. but
it
yeah,
took
I was
me
that
maybe
tired.
an hour to finally calm myself and go to bed. Yeah. But I mean, you're tired. It happened. You try to wrap your mind around it. You really can't, and you just say, "Well, okay, I've got to go to bed. I'm tired." It took me about an hour, but I did just go back to bed myself.
But when I've read about some other people that's had similar type of experiences when they're woken by a spirit, supposedly.
Yes.
They describe the pressure in the chest and feeling actually maybe a breeze or a breath on your face, but it was definitely a warm.
Breath.
Something hitting me in the face like a breath, like somebody breathing in your face.
I don't know
That's
that
what woke me up.
Breath, actually.
That's what woke me up, was feeling as if somebody's breathing in my face.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm in my, when you're still out of it, it's like, okay, who is this?
What's that?
And then you open your eyes and see nothing.
It's pretty weird.
That'll wake you up even more.
I've been touched before. When I was younger, I was looking out the window across the street from where we lived, and this house was on fire, and the fire department was all coming, and I was sitting there watching it all, and I was laying on my stomach on my bed looking out the window watching it. My room was dark, everybody was asleep in the house, and I just remember feeling the presence. I just felt like, ooh, what if somebody was in here and touched me? It just came over me. What if somebody was in here? I was like 13 maybe, and I felt this hand just lay right on my leg, back of my leg. And I turned around immediately because I thought, oh my God, it's my dad playing a joke on me, but there was nobody there.
Have you ever heard of the black dog at the Bloody Pond at Shallow?
No.
Here's another story.
This will have to be our final story. Woo!
The black
Sounds like a
dog
good
at
one.
the Bloody Pond at Shiloh. The Bloody Pond is known as, it was kind of a pond of uniting the wounded and the dead or the dying. At the climax of the battle, a lot of your wounded Union and Confederate soldiers, you may not know this, when you shoot a musket,
I don't
you have
know
to
this.
bite the cartridge. You bite the cartridge, pour the powder down the barrel.
I've seen
As
them
you
do
bite
that.
the cartridge, that black powder gets in your mouth, and it's
sure does.
very bitter.
Bad
And
for
so
you.
you have to constantly douse your mouth with water, trying to get that taste out of your mouth. Eventually, you run out of water in your canteen. So the Bloody Pond was surrounded. It's a very small pond, but there was hundreds of men and horses trying to drink out of that pond and get their last drink of water before they died. And so there was a lieutenant. Tennessee gave, there was 4,800 Tennesseans that joined the Union Army, most from East Tennessee. This one gentleman had brought his black dog with him. As the story goes, I have no way to confirm 100% of it, but the folklore around it's quite interesting. As the story goes, he dies at the pond. His black dog, very faithful, will not move from his side. Will not leave his master's side.
right.
As the story goes, the wife arrived like 2 days later to claim the body. She wanted to carry him back home and be buried instead of a mass grave and such and so forth. So as the story goes, the dog would not leave the side of the master until she arrived. And then and only then were they able to move the body, because he was going to bite whoever
Yes.
touched the body.
I've heard that story.
Well, as the story goes, the dog winds up, for some reason, not surviving. Something happens to the dog before they leave. And as the story continues, they keep talking about on certain nights, they can hear the dog barking, especially near the anniversary of the battle. And
Oh, my heavens.
I was filming that whole day, and so these guys are telling me about it that day, and I said, well, why don't we go to the pond tonight and see what happens? And we all laughed and chuckled and said, well, we'll go and see what happens. And so we get there, and we're on the anniversary night of when the man supposedly dies.
There's a coincidence.
This whole time, close to the date, the dog dies, and that pretty close to the anniversary time. And from what I gather, we heard this barking, and from what I gather, all these guys are saying, you think it's that dog? And I said, it can't be. I said, and we had our flashlights, we started shining them out through there to see if we could see the eyes. We never found a set of eyes anywhere.
Oh my goodness.
And we could hear this barking. So it's an interesting
Sounds
thing.
like our night. Oops.
So it's kind of interesting, but you have to go close to the anniversary when all this took place to hear it.
Were y'all doing a reenactment then?
Oh yeah, we were
yeah.
actually camped on.
So
Shiloh
that's why y'all
battlefield.
were there at the perfect time.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
was camped there. We were all in period clothing and the whole 9 yards.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And at the Bloody Pond, it was perfect.
Yes.
Very cool.
And that's what really sent the chills up my spine. The fact we were all dressed in
Oh,
period
yeah.
clothing.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah.
On that very night. Yeah.
Yeah, because when they do those reenactments,
Yes,
they
those are so
always
cool.
do them
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the anniversary.
Yeah.
We try to, especially these that are more like living history, and every year Shiloh, even during COVID, they still had some events.
Yeah.
And they would try to do it on near the anniversary weekend, or close to it as possible. And that weekend we were filming happened to hit right on the dates.
Gosh, that's just so cool. I have heard about that kind of thing where they're doing reenactments and things happen.
Yeah.
And
I've had multiple experiences on
yes,
that.
Oh, I
yes.
bet.
I've heard
been
some
interesting.
women have told me really frightening things have happened, scary, and they were hard to believe. They could actually see these men walking,
Yeah.
almost as if they were coming, because they were reenacting it, and these women were like, "Oh my gosh, those
Especially
people are actually
Gettysburg.
out there walking."
That's what happened at Salem Church
Yes.
in East Tennessee. Was
They
we
say
actually
Gettysburg
could see,
is just
see them
unreal.
walking around in the graveyards.
Yes, how sad,
Yeah.
But
Restless souls.
A lot of bloodshed.
yes,
Yeah.
lots of pain, agony, and the weather. Oh my gosh, the weather alone. I just
Yeah, my
think,
thought
oh
was,
my
because
goodness.
we're staying in a church, and I actually slept in that church too. My thoughts were, while I'm sleeping in the church, here's bloodstains on the floor.
Yeah.
From the 1860s.
Sheesh.
And then after we saw what we saw in the graveyard, my thought is, I wonder if that blood on that floor came from that man out there.
Possibly.
Yes, exactly.
Never know.
That blood
So all these
will
little
not come out
interesting
of
questions.
hardwood.
Yeah, all these
It
little
won't
interesting
come out.
questions.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's like where I'm at with the different things that have happened in the house. I want to know why and where and how. And so someday I'll meet somebody that has answers, or maybe I'll find them in a book somewhere.
Yeah, that's the one thing I don't have is any answers. But like I said earlier, I don't go looking for it; it finds me. It just does.
Exactly.
Because I'm around it so much. I'm in
and I
historical
mean,
locations
yeah.
constantly.
Y'all are kind of like a conduit,
I think that's kind of the best way to say it.
especially when you're doing those reenactments.
Yes, that's
And I think
wonderful.
because we give an honest voice for them, because we're trying to reveal the true nature of the history and what took place there, as opposed to a general version or a generic version, or overlook it entirely. I'm actually trying to keep their memory alive. And it doesn't matter if they wore a blue uniform or a Confederate uniform. To me,
it's a story.
they have a story to be told.
Yeah, it's
Now, I have
wonderful
Confederate
story.
ancestors, so yes, I'm very partial to the Confederacy.
Yes, of course.
But the Union Army, there's a lot of stories on both sides that have to be told. So that's what I like being able to do, is tell both sides of the story.
Well, my goodness, we have really eaten up our hour and gone beyond.
been
And I
fun.
could still keep going, but you know, we do have to come to a close. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
We are so happy to have
I feel
you
like
here.
I've just been mind melted in all this history.
I know, it's really
I love
great.
history, though.
I know, I love it. It's wonderful, and I'm so
It's been
grateful.
fun.
Yes,
A lot
it
of fun for
has
me.
been fun.
Yes, ma'am.
It's always great to have you, and we're going to have you and Dewey back.
Yeah, that'd
to
be
hear
fun.
about what's
Oh,
going
yeah.
on with you know, what's going on over in Adams. So
Yep.
we'll be talking about that, but.
And we want to hear from you.
Yes.
So reach out to us and let us know. If you want to be on our show, you
That's
can
right.
email us at hauntedparis@usa.com. We're also on Facebook at Paris Paranormal. And you can also find us on YouTube at Enigmatic Anomaly.
That's our channel. That's right.
Enigmatic Anomalies.
And it's the youtube.com.
On YouTube.
That's right, youtube.com at Enigmatic Anomalies. So reach out to us. We do want to hear from you. And thank you for joining us tonight. And again, thank you so very much, Rick. Thank you.
A pleasure to be here.
And thank you, April.
Thank you, Terry.
We'll all be back
Thank you,
again
Rick.
next week. And we'll see you then. Keep in touch. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Huh?